Good morning and welcome to News Breakfast. It's Thursday. It's great to have your company this morning. I'm Michael Rowland.
And I'm Virginia Trioli. Glad you could join us. In our news today, shelling and gunfire return to Aleppo as a ceasefire crumbles and an evacuation is abandoned.
Hopes fade for a South Australian family as a search resumes for their missing boat.
A man in a critical condition on the Gold Coast after being stabbed in the arm and chest.
In sport, modern pentathlete and gold medalist Chloe Esposito named the ABC's Sports Personality of the Year.
Fine and sunny in Brisbane for the first test at the Gabba.
The brief ceasefire in the Syrian city of Aleppo has collapsed, with airstrikes resuming and heavy fighting on the ground. The peace deal was shattered only hours after it was announced, and it means a negotiated evacuation of rebel fighters and civilians has now also stalled.
The UN says the bombing by Syrian government allies of rebel-held suburbs packed with civilians is most likely a war crime. It is understood the deal fell apart after Syria's ally Iran demanded the rebels lift a siege on two small towns southwest of Aleppo.
For more on this, our Middle East correspondent Matt Brown is back with us. He joins us now from Beirut. Matt, good to talk to you again. So how long did this so-called ceasefire last?
Oh, not very long at all, a couple of hours. Each side has blamed the other for restarting the fighting, but there's no... From the government side of the line, we were receiving footage that showed shells hitting apartments in the rebel-held area. So hitting apartments, not hitting open fields or possible positions where, you know, heavy weapons were being fired from.
So, Matt, when we spoke this time yesterday, you were speaking about as part of that deal, rebel fighters and civilians were going to be bussed out of the city. What happened to that plan?
Yeah, I've just been speaking to an activist in Aleppo who said they were preparing to go. People were gathering their belongings. He knows a man who actually set fire to his apartment so that government soldiers coming into the area wouldn't, you know, get any of the spoils. People went that far. They were getting ready to go, and then there was this hold-up, as Michael mentioned, apparently new conditions imposed. And not long after that delay, the fighting resumed.
So in that particular case you're speaking of, he set fire to his apartment, so now he has nowhere to stay, nowhere to go back to?
Well, certainly not his home to go back to. Don't forget, this area now is packed with people who didn't originally live there, people who fled the very rapid government advance over the past few weeks. And that's another reason why the UN Human Rights Commissioner, as you mentioned, has said that what's happening there now may likely constitute a war crime and a violation of international law, because this is a very densely packed area now, and you're seeing airstrikes and artillery going back in there.
So the consequences are, of course, something that we're going to watch very closely as it plays out in the months and weeks following what ultimately ends up in Aleppo. And at this stage, Matt, what will that be? Is the government forces just going to continue to pound this town?
Well, we've heard from Russia and Turkey that they have agreed to try and get this ceasefire back into effect as soon as possible. We're all reasonably sceptical about that for obvious reasons. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has also said that he's been speaking to John Kerry, the US Secretary of State, and they're happy to head to Geneva and work out more details about how to evacuate Aleppo. But for now, unfortunately, the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, has said that the ceasefire agreement was something the Western powers wanted from Russia, and it was just designed to, in his words, save terrorists.
Matt Brown, we know we're speaking to you on a somewhat dodgy line this week.
Other main stories of the morning, and an ocean search for a family missing on the South Australian coast has now entered its third day. Len, Annette and their son Doug Van Dieper were supposed to return to the Cape Jaffa boat ramp on Monday evening. Police fear their boat may have overturned after discovering a bucket and a seat yesterday. Today, the search will be confined to an air and land patrol along the coastline.
A man is in a critical condition after being stabbed in the arm and chest on the Gold Coast. Police say they found the 38-year-old man with stab wounds outside a house in Palm Beach around about 8:45 last night. Detectives investigating are appealing to the public for information about that attack.
The President of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, has admitted he killed drug dealers whilst he was mayor of the city of Davao. The President told a business dinner the killings would set an example for the area's police officers. Mr Duterte's tough stance on crime helped him win the presidency, but this is the first time he's actually admitted killing drug dealers himself.
US President-elect Donald Trump has announced Rick Perry, his former rival for the Republican Party nomination, as his choice to lead the Department of Energy. If the Senate approves the nomination, it would put the former Texas governor in charge of a department that he proposed to eliminate while campaigning in 2012.
Former youth detainee Dylan Voller is applying to be released from prison because of his mistreatment in detention. Footage on the ABC's Four Corners of Voller shackled and wearing a spittled sparked the NT's Royal Commission into Youth Justice. The 19-year-old is due to be released next October after serving a 3-year sentence for aggravated robbery. His lawyer says his client has psychiatric injuries from his time in custody and his sentence should now be reconsidered.
A new report shows Australians are accessing homeless support services in record numbers. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare says the proportion of people seeking support due to family violence has risen sharply. About 279,000 Australians sought help in the last financial year. That was a 14% increase on the previous year. The Institute says the increase could be attributed to better awareness of services and doesn't necessarily mean that levels of homelessness or domestic violence have increased.
In China, 4 volunteers have emerged from a sealed capsule after spending 6 months living as if they were in space. Scientists were studying how food, air and water could be used and recycled using technology developed for China's Shenzhou spacecraft. China's space program says the team functioned well, but one volunteer admitted he was craving both a hot bath and a very large plate of seafood.
American retailer Amazon has made its first delivery using a drone, and it's done this in the United Kingdom. The package arrived at a home in Cambridge 13 minutes after being ordered. The company hopes to expand its drone trial to customers living close to the Cambridge warehouse in the coming months.
And now let's take a look at the weather around the nation's capitals. It'll be sunny in Brisbane, 32, rain in Sydney, 21. We'll also get rain in Canberra, 17 degrees, but dry in Melbourne as well as Hobart, though partly cloudy in both of those cities, 20 degrees. Sunny in Adelaide, 26, and mostly sunny in Perth, 32, while in Darwin it'll be partly cloudy with showers and a possible storm, 33 degrees.
Let's look at the front pages now of the major newspapers around the country, and Save Us is the headline of The Guardian Australia. The story has a desperate plea from civilians in Aleppo as shelling and airstrikes resume in that battered Syrian city.
The Sydney Morning Herald says consumer confidence has dived to its lowest point since April, putting a dark cloud over retailers' Christmas rush.
But in The Age, the Treasurer Scott Morrison is appealing for the media not to be alarmist, and he says the latest retail figures from October are much more positive.
The Financial Review says rating agencies could make a decision on the fate of Australia's AAA credit rating as early as next week, following the government's mid-year budget update on Monday.
The Australian says the federal government wants more money from the Sydney Airport Corporation to help with the construction of the new Badgerys Creek Airport.
The Herald Sun leads with a breakthrough in the treatment of epilepsy, saying a world-first trial will deliver medication directly to the brain, sidestepping the devastating side effects of tablets.
The Advertiser reports ambulance response times in South Australia are getting longer as crews struggle to cope with an increased workload.
The Mercury reports that parking inspectors in Tasmania are trialling body cameras to help prevent verbal abuse and threats and even assault.
The Courier Mail reports on the inquest into the death of schoolboy Daniel Morecambe. The court heard Assistant Police Commissioner Mike Condon bluntly rejected 2 officers' theories that Brett Cowan was indeed the prime suspect.
The Daily Telegraph says the New South Wales government has decided to protect the Hunter Valley's prime thoroughbred farms from a coal mining project.
The West Australian says gas employees on the Wheatstone project are threatening legal action after more than 100 workers had their New Year's Eve leave requests rejected.
And the NT News pictures Philip Boyd, whose arm was gored by a buffalo in Kakadu National Park. Ouchie.
With a fantastic only in the NT News headline there, which you can read yourself.